Welcome back, this is Madan. Today I am going to show you how you can use memory caching feature of ASP.NET Core. With memory cache we can improve our application loading time or data loading time much faster. So in the screen you can see the two instances of the browser running, and both are running the same application, same MVC application. And the one on the left hand side is the application that uses the memory cache, and one in the right hand side is the application that doesn't use memory cache. So the application that doesn't use memory cache is very slow as compared to one that use the memory cache. So right at the moment in my database I have 1,221,001 record, and to display those records it without using memory cache it will take significantly large amount of time. So let's try the right hand side of the application which doesn't use memory cache. So I'm gonna click on the first, and it's uh, sending the request to the server to load the data. And on the screen I have also displayed the time taken to load the data. So it is still loading, and it took almost 15.41 second to load the data from the database. But I have used pagination here, and if I click on the next, then again it's taking some time. It's processing, it's taking time, and now it has taken 13.86 seconds to load the data. Now the application, let's try the application on the left side which displays the same data as that of the application on the right hand side, but it uses the memory cache. So whenever I click on the first, then it loads data very fast in the fraction of the second. You can see the difference here. When I click on the next, then it is very fast and better. It has a very better performance than that of the application on the right hand side. Now let's build our super fast application, and here I have scaffolded the basic project using ASP.NET Core, and I have run the project, and if we see the output of the project, then it is a very basic plain MVC application. Now we are going to modify this application, use the memory cache, and improve the performance of the data loading time, or improve the data loading speed. And I'm going to use the same database that I showed you in the demo before. So let's configure the database, and in the app setting, server equals localhost, user equal to sa, password equal to password, and database memory cache. And the basic template that I scaffolded use the SQLite database, so we're gonna need to use SQL server, and let's download the NuGet package to use the SQL server here. So NuGet package, Microsoft.ASP.NET Core dot Microsoft dot entity framework core dot SQL server. Let's download this, and let's restore it. So it has successfully restored our package. Now let's head over to the CS project, and let's remove this SQLite because we don't need this. And let's go to the startup.cs, and let's change the option dot use SQL server. Now let's try if the SQL server has been successfully integrated or not. So what I'm gonna do is I'm heading over to the migration folder, and I am deleting those migrations that were generated for SQLite database by the default template. And now I'm going to create a migration here, .NET EF migrations add initial. and it's working. So we have successfully created the migrations, and since I have used the existing database, I don't need to update the database now, so let's leave it there. Now let's create a simple model for our application. So new file, employee.cs, namespace casing.models, public class employee, employee id, full name, and from int age. Date time dot now, and we need to put it into our application.db context. Prop db set of employees, and let's bring in the namespace for this. After that, in order to use the memory cache, we need to add memory cache as a service here. So services dot add memory cache. So it is built in with, it comes built in with the .NET framework, .NET Core framework, and we don't need to install any NuGet package here. Now let's head over to our home controller, and in order to use the memory cache, let's first remove this because we don't need this iLogger. In order to use memory cache, we have an interface memory cache, memory cache, and let's create a private field here, and let's bring in the namespace for this memory cache. Let's remove this. After that, without using memory cache, what we can do is, if you want to display all records from the index action of the controller, then we can do context dot employees dot to list employees equals, and for that we need to bring in the context, application db context. Let's create a private field here, create an initialize, and let's bring in the namespace for this as well. So what we do is, we pass this employees right here without using memory cache, and if we use memory cache, then what we can do is we can store the data that we loaded first time from the database into the memory cache, into the memory of the server, and the next time the user sends request to fetch the data, that data will be served from the memory cache or the server application memory, rather than rather than fetching data from the database. So it saves a lot of time and improves the application performance. So in order to use the memory cache, we need to use the slightly different approach. So I'm going to remove this from here, and let's define the list of employee as employees, and we can check. If not, we have a variable called memory cache, private field memory cache dot try get value. This is a function which we can use to get the data that is stored in the memory cache, and try get returns null if it doesn't find the value, it doesn't throw the exception. So in order to store the data in the memory cache, we need a key, and let's put employees as a key, and then it requires the output type of the parameter, so out, and then we already defined the variable here, employees. So what does this mean is that if the memory cache has not been initialized, then we are going to initialize the memory cache. So in order to initialize memory cache, we need to do what we need to do is memory cache dot, we have a set option, and we need to use the key here, employees. These two keys should match, and now we need to pass the value here. So where does our value coming from? It is coming from the database for the first time. So what we're gonna do is context dot employees dot to list. So it fetch the database from the it fetch the employee data from the database and stores that into the memory cache for the first time. Now what we need to do is we need to fetch the data that is stored in the memory cache. So employees equal to get memory cache dot get, and then we can pass key here, employees, and we need to cast that as a list of employee, and we can pass that employee to the database. So when we make a first request to the database to this resource, employee resource, by calling this index action, then it sends the query to the database and loads the record from the database and sends that to the view. But the second time it doesn't go over to the database. Instead it loads that data from the memory cache and sends to the view, so that it reduces the time or the network traffic which takes network traffic to fetch data from the database, and it also, which in turn improves our application performance. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to also count the total number of the employees that is stored in the database. So what I'm gonna do is view bag dot total rows equals employees dot count, and let's save this. So now let's pass this viewBag.total rows to our view, and let's see if it is working or not. So in the index action, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to do viewBag.total rows. Let's remove this from here. Let's remove this all. Okay, and let's wait for the server to get started. And now let's refresh it. So it is requesting pulling data from the database, and it is taking some time because for the first time it is going out to the database and fetching record from there. So it obviously take time to load millions of record from the database, 1 million record from the database. So here it is, it has pulled up 1,221,001 record rows from the database successfully. And next time when I click on the refresh, then it doesn't load, it doesn't take more time as that of before to load the same amount of rows from the database. And what we can do is we can also find out the loading time, the time that is taken to load data from the database. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a variable instance of the stopwatch here. So variable tcs stopwatch equal to new stopwatch, and we need to start the stopwatch here, stopwatch.start, and when it finished loading data from the database, what we can do is we can do stopwatch.stop, and now we can pass the time taken to load the data in the viewBag.total time equal to stopwatch.elapsed. So it gives the total elapsed time. It starts stopwatch just before loading the data from the database or just before starting our process, and it stops when it is finished. And with elapsed we get the total amount of the time that has been elapsed from the start between the start and stop of the stopwatch. So our application is up and running, and let's refresh. So for the first time it takes some time, and I forgot to display the total time in the view, so let's do that. Time taken equal to @ bag dot the variable name is total time. So let's copy and paste it here. Total rows equal to let's give it br, give a br here, and now let's refresh. So it is starting up. Let's refresh, and so this is the first time it is fetching data from the database, and let's see how much time it takes. And it took almost 19 seconds, 19.13 seconds to load the data for the first time. Now let's hit the refresh button and see how much time it takes to load the same data for the second time. And it took the fraction of the second. So this is amazingly fast. So for the first time it went out to the database, fetched the record, and then stored that into the memory cache, and from the second request it is fetching data from that memory cache, which is the server application memory, and it doesn't need to go out to the database and get the data. So the time has decreased significantly here. Now I'm not displaying all the rows that is coming from the database, since displaying the 1 million record to the view takes whole lot of time, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and for that, in order to display the data, I'm gonna use the pagination. So, and for that I have already prepared the view to save the time. Now let's copy paste the code for the view, and I'm also leaving this source code for the full application, for the whole application, in my GitHub URL, which I will be leaving in the description, so that you can also download whole source code from there and practice for yourself. So this is the code for the view, and it is a very self-explanatory. So if we have a we don't have any items in the model, then we display this message, and we display here the total rows here, and total rows, that means the viewback variable that we passed from our controller index action total row, and total time, we display the time taken to load the data here, total time. And then I have copied this code from the bootstrap for pagination, and just modified it, and here we are going to add 4 buttons here: first, next, previous, last. And in this I have passed couple of variables: next page, previous page, and total rows divided by 20 to get the total number of the pages in our pagination. So we need to add those variables, next page, previous page, in our index action. So let's head over there, index, and we need to pass one parameter here, int start page, and let's set it to 0 by default. After that, we need to define couple of variables here. So variable page count, that means how many rows we want to display in a single page. So page count equal to 20, and variable from start from, let's make a variable start from equal to start page into page count. So when the start page is 0, then start from becomes 0. When it is 1, then start from becomes 1 into 20. When it is 2, then start from becomes 1 into 40. And now we need to define those viewback variables that we need in our view, and they are next page and previous page. And this total row is already here, total rows. So let's define those two variables: next page, previous page. So home controller viewback dot next page equals, so if the start page is 0, then next page will be 1. So start page plus 1 and viewback dot previous page equals start page minus 1. After that, in order to fetch data based on our page, we need to modify this employees list of the employee that we are passing to the view. So what we're gonna do is employees equals employees dot skip. So we are going to skip the start from, start from, and then we are going to take page count, and let's change this to list. So what this means is that whenever the start page is 0, then start from becomes 0. So what we do is we skip 0 record and take 20 record. Whenever the start page is 1, then the start from becomes 1 into 20, 20. So we skip first 20 records since we already displayed those record in the page 1. So we need to skip those 20 record, and we're gonna take we're gonna start from the 20 and we take another 20 record. So this is how the pagination works. Let's save this and let's try to see our view. So it's showing some error here, and employee does not contain definition for DOB. So I need to remove some extra field here since we don't have date of birth in our model. So let's remove this DOB from here, and for now we don't need these two as well. So let's remove, and let's remove the call span from here, and let's check if the error has gone or not. And now let's refresh the application. So it is taking some time because it has to load large amount of rows from the database. It is still sending request to the server, and it has successfully loaded the data to our view, which is paginated, and it took 15 seconds. But if I refresh for the second time, then it is taking fraction of the second. Now from our pagination I can move over to the next, and you can see the rows that are displayed in the view. Next I can go over to the previous as well, and it is taking no time at all first, and we can also navigate to the last record. So this is the last record of 1,022,101 row, and it took only the fraction of the second to load the data to the view. There is one major problem with the caching, that is when we insert a new record into the database, then that record is on the database and our cache doesn't have that record, and the view is displaying data from the cache, so that we won't get the newly inserted record from the database. So in the next video I will show you how we can refresh data into the cache whenever the user insert new record into the database, and we will make our application to work with the same performance as it is working now. So this is it for now, friend, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching, and if you are new to this channel, then please subscribe, like and share, and have a great day.